I'd like to remind you that for more Microsoft webcasts, you can go to microsoft.com/webcast. Thanks again for joining us for today's TechNet webcast, 24 hours of SQL Server 2008 Streamlining Data Integration. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Bryan von Axelson. Bryan, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Aurora, and welcome everybody as we continue our journey of 24 hours of SQL Server. We are closing in on the end of the journey as we are towards the end of the 24 different webcasts that we've been doing. We're going to take a look at streamlining data integration. We're really going to take a look at what's called integration services. And as we get started, I do like to point out you have my email down there, brian.vonaxelson@microsoft.com. Again, brian.vonaxelson@microsoft.com, as well as one of the landing pages for the team I'm currently on. That is the Microsoft TS2 team. We are partner focused. So you can go out to www.microsoftts2.com, find out more about the team I'm on, as well as links to our blogs. So as we get started, let's take a look at what we're going to cover today. And so kind of broken it off into a couple different areas as we look at the new support for data sources through ADO.NET. We're also going to take a look at VSTA, and that is not a misprint. That is VSTA, not Vista. VSTA stands for the Visual Studio Tools for Applications. We're also going to take a look at what we can do with our persistent lookups, as well as data profiling. And then at the end, we're going to take a look at merge and change data capture to give us some support for maybe we have some slowly changing dimensions inside the data warehouse. As we go out throughout today's presentation, we're going to be working with a fictitious company called Contoso, where the idea is that we're going to use some of the business intelligence features within SQL Server 2008 to load enterprise data, work with this enterprise data warehouse, take a look at using integration services. As we look at some of the different features, they're going to help us streamline the development as well as the execution and process to extract, transform, and load data. That is an acronym that is out there in the database world. It's called ETL, Extract, Transform, and Load. So we're going to look at what we can do to work with data within the data warehouse. As we move through today's webcast, of course, there's some helpful experience where we're building upon, what we've been working with SQL Server. So familiarity with SQL Server 2005, 2008, very helpful. We're going to be working with integration services, commonly referred to as SSIS. Now, this was the replacement for DTS that we had in SQL 2000. That was renamed with a new service, and it was actually written from ground up, and that is called integration services, and commonly referred to as SSIS, which stands for SQL Server Integration Services, as well as T-SQL. We're going to have just a couple of things in T-SQL, a couple of things, around the concept of Visual C# and .NET. Not really doing a lot of coding today, but we are going to be working within Visual Studio as we work within the business intelligence platform. So one of the first things we want to do is kind of review some of the integration challenges as we look at streamlining data integration as we take a look at to try and uncover some of the new features of SQL Server 2008. So we're going to start with a review of some of the common integration challenges that our integration developers do encounter. We'll also start with a review of the ADO.NET connectivity available. Later we'll take a look at some of the improvements related to the lookups, data quality management as we go through the rest of today's webcast. So let's kind of start with some of those integration challenges. One of the first ones we got to look at is, the connectivity to data sources. So a huge part of the effort involved in building and managing data warehouse involves that data integration. And even if you're not supporting a data warehouse and you're working with your data environment, you probably require some type of data integration activities. So first here we look at some data sources that we need to work with. They may or may not be accessible with the standard OLE DB providers. So you may need to go through different kinds of extra effort possibly buy what I consider tools to migrate the data, or sometimes what we call middleware. You're trying to get the data into a format that you can work with. Now, some integration activities do require unique situations. They're not necessarily supported out of the box with your integration tool, so you may need to include some custom code in your data integration task. So you start to look at what do you do to create your custom script development. And when do we get to the data? So as we look at data demand and the information really moving to the 24/7 basis, what is our window of opportunity for the integration tasks? And we see that window typically is shrinking. Maybe you do have the ability to do it on the weekends, but what we're seeing is the window that we have to manipulate the data and work with the data tends to be smaller and smaller as we are relying upon our data on a more frequent basis. And as we look at bringing data over from sources, do we always get it in a nice, clean format? How much work do we have to do up front? Do we have to do data cleansing tasks? Or do you decide to wait for the problems to get caught and rerouted within your ETL routines? Again, the extraction, the transformation, and the loading of the data. So, what are we doing to work with the data integrity? And then as we work with data, typical by nature, as we look at a data warehouse, it's never stagnant. Products get recategorized, salespeople change, territories change, prices may change. What are we doing within the ETL process to handle some of the changing dimensions efficiently? So as we're going to take a look at some of the new features in SQL Server 2008 around integration services, we're trying to focus that towards solving those types of problems and challenges. Now, the main benefit supplied by ADO.NET support is the ability to work with more data source types. Pretty much any data is now accessible out of the box, which is going to eliminate much of that development cost associated with building and maintaining a destination for your ADO.NET. The configuration of the ADO.NET adapters is consistent with the OLE DB adapters, making the process of working with the adapters within your package a lot easier, faster, which is going to give you a lower cost. And again, support for the ODBC is now rolled into the ADO.NET adapters. The ADO.NET adapters provide access to data provider metadata, so you can enumerate objects. You can then take advantage of a visual query design builder, and we're going to actually play with that as we get into the demos today. And then finally, if a data provider supports batch updates, you're going to be able to take advantage of using batches, and that should help improve performance. Now, with Integration Services 2005, it had the data reader source. Okay, now that has been renamed as the ADO.NET source. The data reader source was configured solely through the advanced editor and only supported direct input of a SQL command. Now, as we look in Integration Services 2008, the ADO.NET source is also improved over the data reader source. So again, with Integration Services 2005, we had the data reader source, been renamed as well as improved and being presented now as the ADO.NET source. So for example, it has the data access modes similar to the OLDB source. You can choose the table or view mode, which I've kind of got a little triangle around here, or rectangle, which enumerates a list of objects, or you can choose to use the SQL command mode. That's going to allow you to manually create your query or access the Visual Query Builder. Incidentally, you can use the ADO.NET source or destination in the Import-Export wizard within the SQL Server Management Studio as well. Now, the ADO.NET destination is actually new. Again, the ADO.NET destination is new to Integration Services 2008. It was not available in Integration Services 2005, although you could develop a custom component if you needed that particular functionality. As we look in Integration Services 2008, you now have the new destination, so no additional coding is required. And here you can see, as we look in here, the batch size. One of the features of the destination adapter is the ability to configure the batch size for SQL client as well as Oracle client providers. Again, to access that property, you must open the advanced editor that I've captured a screenshot here. So let's go ahead and get into our first demo as we take a look at using an ADO.NET data source. So I'm going to jump into my virtual world. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up the SQL Server Business Intelligent Development Studio, which is built within Visual Studio 2008. As we go through this demonstration, as I kind of mentioned, we're going to kind of work within a fictitious company called Contoso. So what we want to do is we want to look at using integration services to populate its data warehouse. The sales department has a list of new resellers, and it's actually stored in an Excel file. It's going to be added to the corporate data warehouse, but has only approved some of the resellers in the spreadsheet at this time. So we're going to use an ADO.NET data source. We're going to go in and set that up and extract the data selectively within the Excel file by using the integration services. So as you saw here, I opened up the Business Intelligence Studio. So the first thing we're going to do is actually create a new integration services project. So I'm going to say File, New Project. I'm going to use the integration services template. And let's go ahead and rename this Contoso ETL. Again, it's extract, transform, and load. And so that's going to start our project over here in the Solutions Explorer. And what we're going to work with next is our package. And as I get the default package here, let's go ahead and we're going to rename that package. And let's just call this, kind of going back to the concept of our demo, we're going to say stage new resellers. And again, that's a DTSX package. And we do have to tell it yes. We want to rename the project object. So there's the package, stage new resellers. So as you can see down here, we don't have a connection, so we're going to need to create a connection manager to provide the connection details for the Excel workbook. So I'm just going to right-click in my tray area down here, and we're going to tell it we want a new ADO.NET connection. And so we want to tell it new. And again, this is where we're going to use the ADO.NET connection for workbook so that we can write a query against it rather than extract all the records within the workbook. So as I've clicked new, we're going to go and we need to set up. So in the provider drop box up here, we're going to tell it we're going to do the ODBC data provider. And this is going to help us set up the ADO.NET connection. So we'll use the ODBC data provider, and then we're going to select a system data source name we've already created, which is called resellers. And so we'll click OK, and then click OK. So we've created our connection. We can see down here we have our connection called resellers. All right, so now we need to add a data flow task to the package. So I'm going to pull open my toolbox here. In fact, we're going to spend a little bit of time in the toolbox today, so I'm just going to go ahead and pin it out. And we'll pull this over just a little bit. We're not going to get too crazy as we work with our different flow pieces. So that should be enough so we can see some of the different pieces. So what we want to do is we want to actually drag a data flow task onto our design surface. And so here we have our data flow task. And then if, now that we have that, we can add the ADO.NET source to the data flow, and we're going to use the ADO connection that we had created earlier. So I'm going to click over into my data flow tab and then grab my ADO net source. And so let's go ahead and go into the ADO.NET source. So I'm just going to double click. And at this point, we can see we've got the connection manager. So as we open up the data source editor, we're going to make some configuration changes. And here's where we're going to use SQL command for the data access mode to provide a query to get the data that we need. So the ADO.NET source is going to be able to extract some specific information that we want to get. So what we're going to do is actually make some changes here on how we're going to work with our access mode. Instead of going into a table or view, we're actually going to tell it SQL commands. And then we're going to go ahead and create a simple query. And we're just going to do a select statement from the worksheet. And what we want to do is we're going to say where the state equals Washington. So select from the spreadsheet, and what we're going to go after here is should be just a couple records. Again, we're going to go selectively because everybody hasn't approved everything. So instead of just bringing the whole thing in, we would say, all right, let's run a select statement, and our criteria is the state is equal to Washington. So let's go ahead and do a preview. And we can see we have 2 records, and those are the 2 records we're going to be working with. We can see number 2 and 10. We'll see that a little bit later. And then the city is Seattle and Renton, Washington. Now also, the metadata about the columns in the specified worksheet is extracted. And so as we go over here into our columns, we're going to see some of the metadata. Again, city, state, postal code, customer number. So some of the metadata that we're pulling over within the specified worksheet. So let's go ahead and click OK. Now, we need to load the data into the reseller staging table using the SQL Server destination. What we're going to do now is drag over a SQL Server destination, and then we're going to need to create a connection to our staging database on the server. So we're going to scroll down here, and we're going to grab SQL Server destination. And I like my things to line up, so I'm going to be a little bit particular. And I'm going to grab my green arrow there and make my connection. So I've made the connection from my ADO.NET. Now I'm going to my SQL Server destination. And so what we need to do now is actually go in and configure the SQL Server destination. So we'll go ahead and double click. And again, we're going to create a new connection manager here. And we're going to, in our OLDB connection manager, we're going to click new as well. And I'm just going to type in local. And then we should be able to look for a particular database name. So we're going to look out here, and we're going to see some of the different databases that are on this SQL Server on the local. And what we're working with is the staging database. Again, this is going to be our destination. So we'll click OK, as well as clicking OK here. Now we're going to select, as we select that reseller staging, as the target for our extracted data. We're looking right here for our table review, and that is going to be in the reseller staging. Let's go ahead and take a look at our mappings. We kind of see how it's going to map over, and it's pretty much a one-to-one relationship here, city to city, state to state, zip code, customer number, etc. So I'll go ahead and click OK. So before we run this package, let's actually go over to the SQL Management Studio and actually look at the target table and see what we have. Notice we do have a couple things from our connection manager here. We have the resellers and the local staging. So I'm just going to switch to the SQL Server Management Studio, and we're just going to run a new query. And I want to run that against my staging database. And we'll just do a simple select. Take a look at what's going on with the reseller staging. And we can see we have city, state, postal code, customer number. But as you can tell, we don't have any information in there yet. We're going to bring that in as we run this package we just created. So let's go back, as we see there's nothing there, back into our Business Intelligence Studio. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to come over to the package, and I'm going to right-click and tell it to execute the package. And as long as I don't have any typos, we should see it go to yellow and then green as it's processing. And that's a good sign for me since I have prepped the demos. I see the 2 rows. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the debugging here. And what do you think those 2 rows are? Well, they're probably Seattle, as well as the other one was Renton, I believe is what it was. So let's go back into the Management Studio, and we're going to execute the exact same command that we just did before we ran the package, and we should see those 2 that we saw earlier. So there we saw the number of employees, 2 and 10. And then I pointed out that one was in Seattle and one was in Renton. So what we can see here that happened is the table now contains the data from Washington for the Excel worksheet. And now this example showed how to use an ODBC connection to query Excel. You can obviously use the ADO.NET source with other ODBC connections or .NET data providers. So as you can see, the ADO.NET source makes it easy to extract data from a different variety of sources above and beyond the other sources that are available out of the box within integration services. So let's go ahead and minimize out of there. We'll keep the Business Studio open. We'll go back. So if you maximize your screen, you can hit the F5 key or hit the Escape key. And let's have a quick review. Got a couple of review questions as we continue through. So, which data source adapter in Integration Services 2005 has been replaced by the ADO.NET source adapter in Integration Services 2008? Kind of mentioned this during the slides as we were preparing for the demo. I see most of you caught it when I was going through the slides. It's fluctuating between 75 and 80% of you coming in with the correct answer, and that is the data reader source. The data reader source has been replaced by the ADO.NET source adapter. All right, so next question, similar in concept. Let's see if you were paying attention. So which data source destination in Integration Services 2005 has been replaced by the ADO.NET destination adapter in Integration Services 2008? Okay, so this is talking about the destination. I got you on this one. All right, we actually have only a select few individuals. We're coming in actually below 25%. Oh, there, it jumped a little bit, up to 33. The answer is none of the above. The ADO.NET Destination Adapter is completely new to Integration Services 2008. The data reader destination, unlike the data reader source, is still available in Integration Services 2008. So again, the ADO.NET Destination Adapter is brand new. All right, so let's go ahead and continue through as we look at some improved design environment for script tasks, script components, includes the ability to work within the web services of the script, as well as taking a look at the Visual Studio tools for applications. So the first thing you should notice about the Script Task Editor in Integration Services 2008 is the new arrangement of the pages. The script page of the dialog box has been moved to the first position, which hopefully enables quicker access to the Edit Script button. You can also choose a script language when adding a script task or component. You're no longer limited to Visual Basic.NET, but you can use C#.NET instead. Once the script task or script component has been created, be aware that the script language property cannot be changed. And you can continue to type in variables for the read-only variables and the read-write variables properties. You might find it easier to specify the variables in the new Select Variables dialog box. Using that dialog ensures that you're using valid variables in the proper scope and with the correct case. Now, another important improvement to the Script Task Editor is the VSTA as the actual development environment. So there's some of the things you can see about selecting the variables. With the VSTA, this is working with the design environment for script tasks and script components, been improved. In Integration Services 2005, the design environment for VSA or Visual Studio for applications, the new design environment VSTA or Visual Studio Tools for applications is hopefully going to help increase our productivity by allowing us to choose which .NET languages to use, enabling references to all .NET assemblies, supporting the creation of proxy classes for our web services, as well as, in addition, the requirement that all scripts be precompiled is actually going to improve the script performance. Now, if you're upgrading script tasks and script components from SQL Server 2005, you will appreciate the seamless upgrade of script tasks and transforms. You can also use a command line tool for a bulk upgrade. Now, if you decide not to convert packages that were containing the VSA script, the packages will still run, but you'll probably see some performance degradation. So, review on the VSTA. You can only use C#.NET in script tasks, true or false. You guys are paying attention. Got about 90% of you coming in with false, which is correct because you can still use Visual Basic.NET as well. So again, you can use C#.NET, but you can also use Visual Basic.NET as well. Once you add code to a script task, however, remember, you cannot change the language. What are the benefits of the VSTA environment for scripting? So we got some different options here. Choice of .NET language, reference to all .NET assemblies, support for the proxy classes. All right, we give it just a couple more seconds. At this point, it is unanimous. Yes, everybody is coming in with all of the above. Each of those choices is a benefit of the VSTA, again, Visual Studio Tools for Applications environment. You can write your script in either Visual Basic.NET or C#.NET. You can reference any .NET assembly, and you can create proxy class, such as when you want to work with a web service. All right, so let's take a look at performing lookups. That's a very common operation within integration services packages, especially in data warehousing. And we're going to take a look at lookup operations. They have been improved in general within Integration Services 2008. They now include persistent lookups to support reusability of caches within the same package and even within other packages. So we're going to review the benefits of persistent lookups, compare the types of caching available for the lookups, and then look at some of the components used to build and manage those persistent lookups. So you can design a package with one data flow to populate the cache and then reuse that cache by one or more separate data flows in the same package. A cache file can be read faster into memory than reading a table. So let me say it again. A cache file can be read faster into memory than reading a table, view, or query for a full cache. It's like a raw file you can use for asynchronous processing, and it's optimized for reads by integration services. In fact, you can actually use raw file source to load the cache contents into a data flow, performance transformations, and then land the results someplace else if you use the data for more than just lookups. You can also add the cache files to the miscellaneous folders of an integration services project, and the package deployment utility is going to include all the files during that package transfer. Now, whether you leave the cache in memory or store it in a file, you can cache the data most frequently used for those high-performance lookups. Then follow that lookup with a no cache or partial cache lookup for rows that aren't cached. Now, you may take a performance hit on the second lookup, but you can minimize the performance change by only implementing this lookup for the less frequently accessed data or data that is more fresh. Now, in Integration Services 2005, only OLEDB, so OLEDB sources, were supported as a lookup reference data set. With Integration Services 2008, you can use the cache transformation to bring in data for lookups from OLEDB, ADO.NET, as well as flat file sources. And then lastly, you are no longer limited. So again, you are no longer limited on the size of the reference data set, both in the 32-bit and the 64-bit. So Integration Services 2008 lookups are going to scale a lot easier. So again, no more limitation. So let's do a comparison between no cache, partial cache, and full cache, and then we'll actually go in and do a demo. So using a lookup with no cache is your best choice for volatile data sets to make sure that you have the freshest data being retrieved. Now, this type of lookup puts no pressure on memory, but the performance is the slowest compared to other lookup types. Now, you could configure lookup with no cache in Integration Services 2005. Nothing has changed in the new version in terms of the lookup itself. As each row in the pipeline is processed, the query executes against the reference data source. Now, the new feature added to all lookup types is the handling of non-matching entries. By default, a non-matching row fails the component, but you can choose to ignore the failure or choose to redirect the row to either an error output or to a special no-match output for further processing. Here's our partial cache. So using a lookup with a partial cache is best when memory must be constrained or the reference data is semi-volatile. Now, this lookup delivers slow performance because it is performing singleton queries. It was also available in Integration Services 2005, but in Integration Services 2008, it does improve the behavior by enabling the addition of non-matched rows to the cache up to a specified percentage of the cache. So performance is going to improve over a lookup with no cache because a row that was missed earlier does not generate a new singleton query to the reference data set. Matched rows are always cached up to the specified memory threshold, and if the non-matched rows are not configured for caching, then the no-match handler is invoked. And then finally, full cache. Now, this type of lookup is best for stable data sets. Again, in Integration Services 2005, large reference tables could cause performance degradation. Further, only the OLEDB connections were allowed. Now, by using the Cache Connection Manager, all other data source connections are accessible. The cache can be an in-memory object that persists for the lifetime of the package, or it can be a cache file that persists on disk. Now, the cache can be used by other lookups in the same package when in memory, or it can be used by other packages when it's saved as a file. So now we're going to take a look at a demonstration as we take a look at working with our lookup caches. So again, I'm going to jump into my demo environment. And in this scenario, the Data Warehouse Manager, we want to change the process for our reseller sales fact data to take advantage of a lookup cache file. So we're going to stay in the Business Intelligence Studio, and we need to add some packages. So I'm just going to go over here to my SSIS packages, tell it to add an existing package. And it's actually out on the file system, so I have to tell it file system, and then browse out. We'll go into my demo files here, and the first one we're going to grab is my lookups. So we'll open that up. And let me go ahead and pull that up. So I'll just double click there. So we can see there the control flow. We have load reseller sales fact table. It's basically just one data flow task. In the pack, you will come in here to our data flow, and we look at some of the different things that are running through our data flow. OLE, DB source, data conversion, look up the reseller, employee, product, due date, all the way through. This is the one that we're going to want to work with here, and that is our sales territory. So what we need to actually do is modify the lookup sales territory transformation so that it uses a cache file, and that cache file is going to be populated by another package. By using this method, we can periodically update the cache files at our convenience, minimize the time required to retrieve the lookup reference data during the window of time allocated to the data warehouse load. So this is the area that we're going to work with within our lookups. So we need to open up another package, and that's the package that we're going to use to load the cache. So again, we're going to add another existing package. We're going back out to the file system. And we're going to select load cache. So I'll go ahead and double click on my load cache to bring it up. So as I open up my load cache, what we're going to need to do is we're going to add a new data flow task to the package. So I'm going to grab my data flow task. We do see we have a Contoso connection over here. So the first thing we need to do is create the data source in the data flow task. We're going to use the OLDB source. So let me go ahead and open up my data flow task. And let's grab the OLEDB source. And we'll bring that over. And we need to go in and configure it, so I'm going to open that up. So we're using the OLEDB source, and this is going to be the only source that you can use if you're configuring the lookup transformation to go directly against a reference source instead of building the persistent cache like we're doing now. When you build a persistent cache, you're storing the data in memory or in a file so you can get data from any source type. So this should expand our options. So as we look at the Contoso, we're going to extract data from the dimension sales territory table. So what we're going to do here is actually tell it where we want to go get the information from. So we're going to use the dimension sales territory. And we need to extract only the sales territory key and the sales territory alternate key. So we're going to go over into the columns here. And we're actually going to take off the checkbox at the top, which is going to take them all off. What we want to go after is the sales territory key and the sales territory alternate key. So we're clicking those on. we'll click OK. So now we're going to need to add the cache transformation to store the extracted data in a cache file. So I'll scroll down here. Let's see if we can get there's the cache transform right there. So we'll drag that over here. And we need to connect it. I'll bring my green arrow over to connect it. So we're taking a cache transformation to store the extracted data in the cache file. A cache transform can be used either as a destination, as we're doing here, or it can be used to load a cache from the pipeline, send the data onto another transformation or destination area. Now the cache transformation needs a new cache connection manager for the cache file. So we're going to open up our cache transform. You see we don't have the connection, so let me open that up. And we're going to create a new connection, so we'll just say new. And we want to rename this. Let's call it sales territory cache. And we want to save the cache to a file so we can use it in other packages. Use a cache file here. And then we're going to do it C:\sales territory.caw. So what we want to do is we want to identify the column to use for lookup. So we're going to take a look at the index values. So I'm going to go over here into my columns. So here I'm just going to widen up the column name. I need to change this index position to 1. Then I'm going to highlight all of these. Let's see if I can get it to highlight here. And then right click and copy. So I'm going to take this over to the other half as we set the mappings to the cache file. And here we can look at just the mappings. We can see it's sales territory key to sales territory key, sales territory alternate, sales territory alternate. All right, so let's go ahead and click OK. We can see the red X went away. That's a good thing. So now we're going to go to the other side. So here we've built the cache, to load the cache. Now we need to go over and work with the lookups and actually change the sales territory lookup in the lookups package. So we're going to go out and work with the lookups package. And we're going to go into the sales territories. We need to modify the lookup sales territory transformation to actually use the cache file to get the sales territory key. So we're going to open this up. And one of the things we want to do is change the connection type to cache connection manager. So we use the cache connection. Now we can tell it to specify how to handle the roles. So remember we talked about that as one of the changes, how to handle rows with no matching entries. We're going to leave it on fail component. So again, we can configure the lookup handle rows not found during the lookup to ignore the failure. Again, redirect the non-matching rows to their output, special no match output. Again, we're going to keep with the default of failing the component. We need to configure the cache connection to use the sales territory cache. Remember, at this point, the cache file doesn't exist because we haven't executed the load cache package. Now, that's not a problem. We can still configure the lookup to the cache. So I'm going to go over to my connection. And again, we're going to tell it's new. Sales territory cache. We're going to tell it to use a file. The file is going to be C:\sales territory, CAW. And then remember we copied the metadata about the lookup cache in the clipboard. So we're going to go over here into the columns. And we need to select all here. So I'm just going to go over here and right click, say select all, and then right click and tell it paste. And so it brought over what I had copied from the metadata working with the lookup cache from the clipboard. We'll go ahead and click OK. Click OK. All right, so hopefully I didn't fat finger anything, that everything is configured properly. So the first thing we need to do is execute the load cache package. Let's go back over there and right click and we'll tell it to execute the package. Again, we should see yellow to green, green, everything looks good. So at this point I'm going to stop my debugging. And let's go over to the lookups and let's just see how we execute here. So again, we see some of the different processes. Now this one's going to take a little bit longer because there's a lot of information. That's why we're moving the one for the sales territory into the cache. So there we're starting to see the yellow. That's good, no errors. Let's just see what happens down here. Look up sales territory. And as long as we get green, all right. So in this demo what we did is we saw how to set up and load a cache file independently of a package that performs a lookup using that cache. That ability is going to give you some different flexibility in terms of the source data you can use and the timing of the cache load relative to the execution of the lookup. And importantly, using a cache file can be significantly faster than loading a reference data set in a traditional lookup configuration. This can be really important when we're limited to the time available as we're working with our data warehouse. All right, let's go ahead and go back and do some review. So, which of the following statements is not true? Which of the following statements is not true? And most of you caught it. I kind of tried to draw a certain attention to it. And that is one of the changes in Integration Services 2008. You can reference a data set larger than 4 GB in both the 32 and the 64-bit. So again, in both the 32 and 64-bit, you can now go larger than 4 gig. So where it says a lookup cache must be less than 4 gig, that is not true because you can now go larger than 4 gig. All right, which is the fastest source for reading data into memory for a lookup? I think we all get that one. So again, which is the fastest source for reading data into memory? And yes, everybody's grabbing that one correctly. Over 100% cache. So everybody got that one correct. Good job. Well, let's keep going through as we take a look at identifying data quality issues. So we look at identifying and resolving data quality issues as we look at data integration, data warehouse, data mining projects. Options prior to Integration Services 2008 were to either manually code profiling routines using SQL script or custom app. Maybe you purchase a third-party product. What we have in SQL Server 2008 is a data profiler task to help uncover data quality issues before they impact the downstream systems. So as we perform data profiling, typically it's manual, labor-intensive, time-consuming. The process is ideally automated. You can do data profiling early in the cycle to put high-quality data into new tables and late in the cycle to make sure the quality is maintained. I remember some of the data profiling I used to do on a manual process. I was working with some of the fun mail that we get. I had several clients that would send you great offers in the mail. It was actually focused around the automotive industry. And anybody that's ever worked with the automotive industry, those systems are quite unique, and there was usually a lot of data cleanup before we could take that data and put it in the mail merge type of software that's out there to create those mass mailings that you receive to come get service, or $5 off your oil change and things of that. So we used to do significant data cleanup as we looked at grabbing that information out from the automotive systems and then bringing it into typically PC-based mass mailing type of systems. So I can understand that manual, labor-intensive, and time-consuming process. So what we have now is the data profiling task that can actually be used to perform one type of profiling or many types of profiling at once on tables that you identify in the task properties. When you add the task to the package control flow, you configure which profiles to execute, specify the output to the results, which are then saved in XML format. You can save the output to a file for viewing with the data profile viewer, which is actually a standalone utility, or you can save the output to a variable for additional processing within the package. As we take an example, because data profiling occurs in the control flow, you cannot implement data flow conditional logic to respond to the results. However, you can use the script task to execute an XPath query against the output, such as testing whether the percentage of null values exceeds a specified threshold. The data profiling task includes profiles that operate on sets of columns. So, for example, you can use the candidate key profile type. We're going to see that in a demo in just a moment, to examine one or more columns to determine whether the values in the examined columns uniquely identify each record in the table. This definitely will make more sense when we get into the demo. Therefore, you're going to represent a key column or columns. Another set-based profile type is a functional dependency. You can use this profile type to determine if values in one column are dependent on values in another column. So, to take an example, a zip code or postal code that should always be associated with a single state or province. So this profile shows you the count of records for which the dependency holds true, and the count of records, if any, that violate the dependency. Column-based profiles are focused exclusively on one column at a time. The column length distribution profile looks at each record in the column, calculates the counts by each distinct length. You can see these lengths as an absolute value as well as a percentage. That profile is helpful for finding records that violate a common length rule. The value distribution profile shows each discrete value in the column with a record count and a percentage of the total. You can confirm that data conforms to expectations or see whether anomalous data exists within the column. Now, another column-based profile type is column null ratio. That profile calculates the percentage of records having a null value in the analyzed column. The profile includes an absolute count as well as a percentage. So you can see there's different ways that we can go and actually look at what's going on with the data. The utility allows you to browse the contents of the data profiling task output file. This is the data profile viewer. We're going to bring this up in just a moment. For some profile types, such as common value distribution, the utility includes a drill down feature allowing you to view the underlying details for a selected column profile. So let's go ahead and get into our last demo of the day as we look at doing some profiling with our data. So here we're preparing to load customers from the Contoso's OLTP system into our data warehouse, we want to review the data quality of the table first. So again, we're going to have to go and add another package, one that I have set up for our demo. So we're going to add an existing package. We'll go to the file system, and we'll browse out, and we're going to use our data profiling. So let me go ahead and pull up my data profiling. Now the source for the data profiling requires an ADO.NET connection using the SQL client provider. That connection must be set up before creating a data profile task. So we can see the connection here with Contoso. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump in my toolbox to open here. Dock that back up. Come on now, dock. There we go. Okay, we need to get my toolbox to open here. There's my flow task. Now come on, toolbox. Let's see if you... I need to drag over one of my tools. All right. Let's try and bring it back in. And I don't see my tools. I need to get my data tool back for my data profiling task. All right, well, let's go back to the review questions. And in the background, I will make some changes to the virtual machine and restart it, and we'll see if we can go back in and get that demo to kick off. Let me start that up in the background. And while that's booting up, we'll go ahead and let's talk about change management, and then we'll come back to that demo. So while that VPC is rebooting, so I can get my tool back, when data changes in source systems, you need to find a way to record that change in the data warehouse. As we look at integration services, it includes only what we consider the slowly changing dimension wizard. to set up a data flow to achieve this goal. Today we're going to consider two alternative strategies that are available in Integration Services 2008. One is called change data capture, and the other one is the merge statement. So first, let's talk about change data capture. So the key issue with managing challenging data is finding what data change so that dependent downstream systems such as data warehouse can be updated. Change data capture is a new feature within SQL Server 2008 Enterprise Edition. It's going to track insert, updates, and deletes to a SQL Server table based on a transaction log. To use that feature, you must explicitly enable the change data capture at the database level and on a table-by-table basis. Data that changes in the source table as a result of inserts, updates, or deletes is recorded in special tables created for change data capture. That information is gleaned from the transaction log so as not to adversely impact performance of the source tables. Information about the change, what was made, and in what sequence is stored as a log sequence number or an LSN. And you can use the LSNs to keep track of what change data you have already processed and to identify new change data. Now, change data capture is very useful for implementations that trickle feed the data warehouse. This can provide a scalable alternative to the slowly changing dimension wizard. There are two parts of the implementation. You can see here the first one on the left is the control flow. In the control flow, a series of tasks designed to retrieve data from the change data capture tables or to wait until the data becomes available. And then we have the data flow. Once the data has been captured and detected by the package, the data flow retrieves data from one or more sources and then performs the type of change indicated in the tables. That is data that is inserted, updated, or deleted as applicable. And then the merge statement. The merge statement is useful as a simple alternative to the slowly changing dimension wizard. A simple method for managing slowly changing dimensions is to set up and execute SQL task in the control flow to execute a merge statement. A merge statement has a target table that will receive the result of the inserts, updates, or deletes. The source is a select statement that returns columns that will be used to compare with the target table to determine whether an insert, update, or delete should be performed. As we implement a type 1 change, so let me grab that for you here. So here we're talking about the type 1 change right here. Using a merge statement, we include the when match clause to find an existing records and follow it with the Boolean expression to define the condition to trigger an update. If a record in the source is not found in the target, when not matched, the clause is used to insert the new record. You can include a second when match clause which must use a delete action. That is typically less common when you're using it for a dimension management, as records are not normally deleted from the dimension table. We also have type 2. Type 2 changes are better handled within a data flow task because the current dimension record must be deactivated by setting the end date and the current column values, and a new record must be inserted. Let's do a review on managing change, and we'll go back and see if we can get in to that demo again. So you need only to enable change data capture at the database level, true or false. Kind of a trick question. Got most of you got just about 70% coming in with false. You must enable change data capture at both the database level, so you do need to enable it at the database level, but not only at the database level. You have to enable it at the table level as well. So it's false. You must enable change data capture at both the database level and the table level. How many when match clauses can be included in a merge statement? And it looks like everybody was paying attention. Now it's a split. Now it's 50-50. Is it 1 or is it 2? Is it 1 or is it 2? You can have 2. You can have only 2 when match clauses in the merge statement, with the first using an update action and the second using a delete. All right, so let's go back and see if we can get back into my virtual world. We'll go back in. To Visual Studio, and we'll try and open up that package. All right, so it's adding existing package, file system, and we're going to go do data profiling. We're going to go try and do data profiling. All right, so we double click. So again, the source within Contoso. There they are. So the difference here is we were doing data flow tasks. Now we're going to do a data profiling task. So I'm going to drag that over into my designer. So we're going to add a data profiling task to our package. Now again, we could configure the output of the data profiling task to go to a variable if we want to query the results in a script task, add it to the workflow. What we're going to do here is we want to use the data profiler viewer to analyze the data quality in a separate step. So we will output the data profile results to a file. So to configure that, I'm going to go ahead and double click on my data profiling. And notice here we have the ability to work with our file connection, my destination. So I'm just going to tell it new file connection. And I actually want to tell it to create a file. And we're just going to call it C:\\/ data profiling.xml. And we do have the ability to work with our overwrite protection, true or false. I'm going to go ahead and set it to true. Again, we can reuse that file connection in subsequent executions as we change it to true. Now, I'm going to use the quick profile feature to create multiple profiles for the same task. Because we're interested in analyzing one column only, we're going to use the Contoso connection and select the sales.customer table. We're going to keep the default profile options by adding the column pattern. So I'm just going to click my quick profile button and then my connection. Again, we're working with Contoso. And then we're going to go and get the sales.customer. So let me go down here, sales.customer. And I'm actually going to click on my column pattern profile. And we're going to work with our candidate keys. I'm going to pull that up in just a moment. We'll click OK. Now we could change the properties for each profile in the editor. Also, we can add profiles here directly rather than using the quick profile, such as when we want to profile 2 or more tables or multiple columns in the same table. Again, we're just going to take some of the defaults here. Let's just take a look at our column value distribution, profile request, and then here's some of the different things that we can work with. So we could actually work with our value distribution. Do we want frequent values? Do we want all values? And then what about some of our thresholds? We could change the value distribution option property as well as the frequent value. So if we were using a frequent values option, we could change the threshold to a higher or lower level. Value is considered frequent if the ratio of the records in the table with a particular value and all records exceeds the thresholds that you define here. Go ahead and we'll click OK. And then we want to execute this. So we'll just tell it to execute the package. Notice we see the data profiling XML. So now we went green, the execution completed, so I'm going to stop the debugging of it. And now we want to actually run the data profile viewer. And we'll maximize that up, and then we're going to go out and open that XML file that we just created. Data profiling. That is the output of the task that we just ran. So I just want to open it up so you can see the end results. So here you can see the data source into the server, databases, AdventureWorks, tables, sales.customer. So one of the first things we want to look at is the candidate key profile. As we open up this portion of the output, the candidate key profile, the results tell us that the customer ID and the account number uniquely identify each record in the table. There's no key violation, so that tells us, as we look up here with our customer ID and account number, that our data is clean. We'll jump over here into our account number. A couple things that we can look at. Column length distribution profile. This is the specific record for the account number column. Again, this result confirms that all records are the same length. So we see a minimum of 10, maximum of 10. So this, again, is an account number that we have within the database. So you can see here we have just a little bit over 19,000 records, and all of them have that 10. So again, depending on our business rules and how we've set it up, but looking at it from, okay, we've got 10 for our account number, the data looks like it's in sync. We look like we're clean, we're in good shape. And we say, okay, is there anything that's in a null ratio? So this is looking at any records with null values. So we can see that as we went through those 19,000 records, that we have none with null value. So that's good. And then what about the column pattern? The profile is useful when we want to detect a pattern or confirm that a pattern is consistent in a particular column. So here we're looking at a pattern for the account numbering system. We have a static prefix of AW000 followed by 5 digits. And we can see that that pattern is in play as well, and we have 100%. So just a quick look at doing some profiling with the data, making sure that it's clean as we brought it in. Worth going back and making sure we could get that demo in. So let's do a couple review questions on data profiling since you got to see the demo. Where can you add a data profiling task in a package? We got most of you coming in. Again, control flow, data flow, both control flow and data flow. Data profiling task can only be used in the control flow. So those of you that had option 1, the red control flow, correct? You are correct. Those of you that had yellow, you were half correct. So again, control flow. And which of the following data quality issues can the data profiling task discover? Orphan data, values too long, too short, unexpected null values, invalid string. And it looks like everybody was paying attention during the demo. The correct answer is what most of you are selecting right now, which is purple, all the above. All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap up today's session. So here's a summary of what we talked about. First one was around the ADO.NET connectivity. It's going to give us much broader access to data within our organization so that we can work with integrating any data source, deliver any data to destination. Visual Studio tools for applications, support for script tasks, going to give developers a fully functional IDE and support for development in C#.NET. Lookups have been improved to support in-memory. We looked at no cache, partial cache, and full cache. We actually did a demo of that, so we were working with the cache files. And one of the big things is that we can get bigger now in both 32 and 64-bit, larger than 4 gig. We need to identify data quality issues before loading the data in the data warehouse. And then lastly, we looked at implementing change data capture new to SQL Server 2008, as well as the merge statement for managing changing data as an alternative to what we talked about in the first 4 areas, as we were looking at slowly changing dimension wizard. So with that, we're going to turn it back to Aurora. She's going to tell you about the survey and wrap up today's webcast. And in the meantime, I'll take a look at what's going on in the Q&A panel and get you taken care of.
Alrighty, thanks so much, Bryan. So if you have any questions for Bryan, go ahead and submit those now by using the Q&A pane, and he'll get to those in just 1 minute. Also, watch your inbox tomorrow for an email with info about viewing this webcast on demand. And the email will also include a link to a downloadable PowerPoint of today's webcast. So you should be seeing the survey up there now. If you could just take 1 moment to fill out the survey before you log off, we do appreciate any feedback that you can provide for us so we can always continue to improve our webcast for you. So with that, Bryan, I'll hand it back over to you to answer those questions.
All right. I had a couple questions that, I'm new to packages or samples available. Send me an email. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get those posted to the blog. I've got to, this week and next week, I'm actually home off the road from doing launch events. I've been to Exchange Connections. I'm getting ready to go to TechEd 2008 down in Orlando. I'll be there for the IT Pro. So I got a couple weeks. I'm going to try and get all my samples out to my blog. But if you send me an email, I will make sure that we get that out there. And in just a moment, as we wrap up, I am going to post my email and my blog address in the Q&A panel, so you get that. Is data profiling available in SQL 2005? Not with what we just took a look at. I'd have to actually look and see what are some of your options in doing the data profiling in 2005. With that, I'll get the other ones posted, and if you just hang out for just a few moments in the Q&A panel, I'll get my email as well as my blog address. So with that, I'm good.
All right. Well, I'd like to remind everybody just to take a second to fill out that survey. And with that, I'd also like to extend a special thanks to Bryan for presenting today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of today's conference.